Hi everyone, welcome to a brand new video series called Better Call Paul. I know, it's a bit cheesy, it's a gimmick, but allow me to explain. My name is not Paul, I'm Tace. I'm the technical evangelist at Varnish Software. And in this video series, I'm going to give my colleague Paul a ring and ask him a question, hoping that he can answer that question. And in the very first episode, we're going to look at the brand new Varnish Enterprise release called Varnish Enterprise 6011R4 and allow Paul to explain what the cool new features are. Let's give Paul a call and see if he's available.
Hi, Paul. Apparently, there is a new Varnish Enterprise release, 6011R4. And I thought, why not call Paul and ask him what it's all about? So, are you ready to talk about this, Paul?
Yeah, sure.
Well, before we actually dig into the nitty gritty, I want to ask you 6011R4. What does it actually mean?
Well, the versioning of Varnish Enterprise follows the versioning of the open source LTS version, which is currently at 6011. And whenever we make a release, we add this R1, R2, or so on, until the open source version, LTS again, changes. And then we start again at R1. And now currently we are at R4, the fourth release after the open source 6011 was released. Sorry.
Yep, that makes, in my mind, total sense. And I hope that the people watching this now fully understand the versioning that we use.
Well, sometimes it doesn't make sense. And indeed, it doesn't make sense because we do bring some of the features from Varnish Cache into Varnish Enterprise when there's new developments that make sense to bring back to Varnish Enterprise. And then we contribute as well. Some features from Varnish Enterprise to Varnish Cache. And of course, whenever there's a bug fix that any of us, either the enterprise side or the open source side, discover, then we look at this bug and we fix it in the other version.
Let's have a look at some of these contributions, more specifically the ones that are in the new Varnish Enterprise version. So if I go to the top of the list, and we won't cover them all, right? There's just too much stuff. Some of it is very technical and very niche. So let's go for some of the cooler ones. On top of the list, it says backend tasks can now queue if the backend has reached max connections. Elaborate, Paul. Tell me more.
Yes. So when you have a backend in Varnish, you can have a property called max connections. And this is a limit on how many concurrent connections Varnish can have to this backend. And whenever you are at this limit, you will simply serve a 503 an error message. But that was before this feature arrived. And now it's possible to actually wait a bit. And then if there's a connection available, do the request whenever that happens. So you don't have to serve as many error messages. For example, if you have a spike of connections that you want to make or requests that you want to make to the backend. And
yeah, makes sense. And I also see that there's indeed some timeouts here to prevent you from like infinitely waiting.
Yes, that's necessary. You do want to fail fast if you know that your backend is in real trouble. And but you also don't want to fail too much. And this is a way to strike a good balance between these two potential problems.
All right. Next one on the list that also caught my eye was the fact that you can set an expect_close attribute to backend probes. What's the added value there?
Well, backend probes are quite simple. And one of the things that Varnish does to look at the backend is probing. And essentially, Varnish sends a request to the backend, and it includes the backend close directive. And then the backend is supposed to send an answer and then close the connection. And whenever you have expect close equals true, that is also necessary for the probe to work. But now it's possible to do expect close equals false, which will allow very primitive backends not understanding the connection close header to also succeed or make Varnish happy.
Great. So let's move on to the next one, which is all related to VMod UDO. Now, I know UDO stands for Unified Director Object, and it's a very nice Varnish Enterprise addition to route traffic to multiple nodes, but I haven't looked into those new features yet. There's quite a number. Can you walk us through it, please, Paul?
Actually, all of these features which arrive at R4 are to facilitate self-routing, which is a way to set up Varnish in a particular way, routing requests between different Varnishes. And in this way, optimize how much you can store in cluster. And the new methods, they make this easier to control.
All right, let's go on to the next one. I like that one quite a bit for a variety of reasons. It's the fact that our key value store module now has a gauge method. Can you describe the importance of that and like provide the right context for people to understand this and to appreciate that addition?
Yeah, KV store is a vmode for adding counters, custom counters in VCL, and they can be used for many things where counters are missing. And one of the things that have been missing is the concept of a gauge. A counter is something that can only increase. A gauge is a value that can go up and down. And now you also can have custom gauges through KV store.
So if I understand correctly, this is a direct response in terms of compatibility with like the actual data types in Varnish stat and vmod stat to be able to have a value that doesn't just increase, but can also decrease.
Yes, this is for increasing or improving the observability of what is going on inside of Varnish through VCL.
I have one more, the last one before we end this video. Apparently, there have been some improvements to the JSON Web Token vmod JWT. Explain.
Yes, the latest addition is simply increase of the number of algorithms that can be used to sign JWT. So now you have more algorithms, but there are several other improvements in JWT to be introduced later, but I will not promise anything right now. Is it just a teaser?
Well, what is interesting here, and that's a final question, sort of a wrap-up question I'm going to ask you. So this will probably excite some of the people using Varnish Enterprise, but are some of these features going to be contributed back to Varnish Cache for our open source users?
Yes, we are going to bring some of this to open source for sure. For example, I expect the back and connection queue to be brought to open source, but of course that's a long process to be had before it's included into the open source project, like all features that you add to a project like that.
Great, thank you, Paul. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for taking my call. I hope I can call you again soon with yet another question.
You can for sure. Have a nice day.